So, good morning, Happy New Year, and a very warm welcome to this New Year's morning brief with the topic Responsible Business. In 2025, business and society face unprecedented change and transformation. From geopolitical tensions to climate crisis and new technology, our business landscape is being reshaped in profound ways. These forces call for a deeper reflection on what it means to operate responsibly. At CBS Executive Fonden, we are dedicated to responding to this new business reality and provide thought leadership to support your transformation. So a key task for leaders across business and society is to respond to this new reality and to really drive the change towards a more responsible future for our people, our organizations, and society as a whole. My name is Jess Hansen, and I'm the CEO of CBS Executive Fonden. We educate leaders and board members to be really responsible for the blueprint, not just the footprint. As a leading Nordic-based university operator, we don't see responsible business as a choice, but rather as the license to operate, if you will. And therefore, I am thrilled that we are joined this morning by more than 200 curious participants who will contribute to our conversation and hopefully together gain new perspectives during these next 40 minutes. And I am very thankful that I am in company with one of the leading executives within this area, CEO Britt Meelby Jensen and Professor Andreas Rasche, whom I will introduce shortly. But as always, first a practical remark. If you have, and we do hope you have, questions along the way, please write in the Q&A box, and we will wrap up this session with approximately 10 minutes of Q&A. And also you should be notified that this morning brief session will be recorded and shared with you afterwards. So let me start with an introduction of our two panelists today. As many of you know, in Denmark, it's customary to hear from both the King and the Prime Minister in relation to the new year. Thus, we thought here at the Foundation, what better match than to hear from last year's Leader of the Year, as well as Women Board Award recipient, CEO of Ambu, Britt Meelby Jensen. So a very warm welcome to you, Britt.
Thanks, Anna.
It's lovely to have you with us. So Britt commenced, as I would say many CEOs do, commenced her career at McKinsey and later transferred to Novo Nordisk as a corporate vice president. And Britt has held a number of executive positions within the healthcare sector. And then in 2019, you joined the board of directors, actually, of Ambu, where later on you took over in 2022 as CEO of the company. And then alongside your role as CEO and top executive, you are also a board member of Novo Holding and Hempel as well. And Britt, I could talk a long time about all your qualifications and victories, but I will suffice it to say that at least where I stand, you are mainly known for your ability to drive growth and foster innovation, but you are also known as a top leader who has both the mind, the heart, and the stomach for leadership. And for that reason, we are extremely excited to have you with us today. And we look forward to hearing your opinion on the topic. And then we have, I like to say, our very own. So CBS Professor Andreas Rasche. Andreas is the Professor of Business in Society at CBS Center of Sustainability. And Andreas's research has been published in several top-tier international journals. His research examines the intersection of corporate sustainability, sustainable finance, and the political role of firms. And even more important, at least in my view, Andreas is also the academic director of our new leadership program, the CBS Executive Sustainable Leadership and Transformation. And this program will kick off anytime soon because we kick off on January 20th. And I would like to invite each and every one of you in the audience to consider joining us for the next cohort of this program, which will be in September, if you want to learn more about today's topic. So Britt and Andreas, without further ado, it's a great pleasure and privilege to have you with us this morning, and thank you for joining. Now let's dig into the questions. And there are so many we could ask, but we have narrowed it down to 3 core ones. And then obviously, like I said, we will take questions as well from the audience. But to start off, really, I would like to start with you, Britt. In times of geopolitical tension, and we must say it's on the news 24/7, a certain character visiting Greenland and whatnot, and global crisis around, what does really responsible business mean to you? What is your take on this?
Yeah, that's a very good question, in particular these days. So I think, in my view, I mean, being a responsible company is very much that, I mean, that you run your business. So I mean, you drive your growth, you manufacture and deliver products in a way that has a positive impact on society and on people in general, on the planet and the economy for that matter. And I think that's very much about being not only driven by profit, but also really a fundamental desire to improve life around the world, both when it comes to making sure we have a safe environment, but also thinking about ethical and equal working conditions. And I think I've been fortunate to move into the healthcare industry many years ago, and that's of course where you get a lot of fulfillment when you go to work every day, making a difference for other people. But I also would say that in the last number of years, this being responsible has of course expanded much broader than only doing good with the business you're in, but also addressing, everything else in the environment.
And in terms of your company, in terms of Ambu, can you maybe give us some examples on how you strike this balance really between purpose and profit that is so important? Because I agree with you. I also believe that being in the healthcare sector sort of provides you with a very important why to begin with. Rather than many other types of industries and sectors that you could be in. But needless to say, Ambu also needs to make a profit if it wants to be in business tomorrow. So how has this changed over the years, and how do you see Ambu striking that balance today?
Yeah, no, I think it's a good question, because I think it has changed, and I think the whole balancing purpose and profit is something that at least is much more top of mind for me than it used to be. And I think because I think on one hand, we need to act responsible and in everything we do, and as there is more geopolitical tensions around the world, as an example, that's something that forces us as a company to reflect much more around this. Also, as there's, the focus on our planet and sustainability also means that we have to, in a much different way than we used to, balance between what is it we do for the planet, and also being ready to then compensate on product where I feel a little bit that if we go, a number of years back, I think it was really top of mind for CEOs that you have to drive profit. And I think for me, I think the whole creating results, not only delivering profits, but also growing your business and delivering growth, I think is still something that has to be front and center, because if we are as a business not able to make money and to grow that way, then we cannot continue to invest, and then we get into a place where we run out of business, and
it's a cycle.
Exactly. And I think on one hand, the dilemma is that you need, because the world is changing so much with new technology and everything else, you have to innovate much faster as a business than you used to do. So for me, that means that you have to be much more on the ball for how is it that you can continue to make money, and you cannot do that by just continuing what you have always done. So I think that's one thing where the fast technology change, as an example, forces you to think faster. And then at the same time, you have that other agenda where things pop up that, I mean, of course, we have to try to be more prepared, but still things pop up that you have to address and find solutions for immediately. I think that, I mean, not to go into a lot of details, but when the Russia situation came up, that was right before I took over as a CEO. I mean, there you had to really make a fast decision around, I mean, how do you balance the purpose versus profit? And I think in our industry, in healthcare, a lot of companies actually decided not to exit Russia because there were different ethical dilemmas around that you actually offer products that keeps
people alive.
But I mean, in Amber, we made the decision to withdraw because we still also felt that we think it's the right thing to do with our values. So we don't contribute also to with our products to help treat people that then go to war. So I think, but I think these conflicts are just getting more and more complex and
forevermore, and the world has changed so much since you joined as CEO. I mean, it must have been feeling like a fast forward cockpit situation for you. And thank you so much for providing that very specific example, because I think it illustrates clearly both the speed and the necessary speed of decision making, but also the necessity of a moral compass. Because you do need to take these decisions quite swiftly. So you need to be very sure on the ground on which you stand, right? So thank you, Britt. And Andreas, if I turn to you in your academic perspective, how do you see the role of responsible business? What are the characteristics of that?
Yeah, thank you, and good morning, everybody. I think this relationship between geopolitics and responsible business is really something from an academic perspective that is not studied very well. We see more studies coming up, and I think it is absolutely necessary. I remember in 2006, I worked for the UN, and I wrote a paper actually on geopolitical crisis and responsible business, and everybody was asking, "What are you doing?" You know, back then. And I think
being
the last
yeah,
exactly. Because also the links back then were not that clear, right? I mean, that was still the world of open borders and almost unlimited globalization back then. But I think the last 2 to 3 years have shown that geopolitics impacts businesses through a lot of channels. I mean, just take 3 quick examples, right? You have changes in tariff structures. Look at what the EU has done with EVs from China, right, in order to protect European car manufacturers. You have foreign investment restrictions, which come up, and they usually come up very quickly. And you have sanctions, embargoes, forced market exits. And as Britt rightly said, I mean, these things come up very quickly. So they really put pressure on executive teams, on leadership. So I would argue you really see responsible leadership in these times of geopolitical struggles, because this is when you really need to reflect on your values. And to me, I think there is a big difference between being informed about these geopolitical struggles and responding to them. And I think we don't differentiate both enough, because a lot of companies kind of say, yes, we monitor the situation and so on, but monitoring is one thing. Being able to respond to it and having capabilities internally, having scenarios internally to respond to these situations, to me is something different. So responsible leadership in these times of geopolitical struggle is a lot about preparedness to act aligned with values. And I think this is what also Britt said, and I very much agree with this. It's broadening your strategy, your view of the strategy, you know, that usually when we look at strategy, we look at it in a quite also limited way very often. But when you look at geopolitics, you need to broaden the picture. You need to look at different scenarios for impact. And most of all, I think you need to reflect on your risk appetite. And that was the situation in Russia, right? I mean, how much risk are you willing to take? And I think that put also a lot of executive teams and boards in a quite difficult situation, because suddenly you need to ask yourself questions under a lot of pressure. about which risks are you willing to take in a very swiftly changing situation. And then, as we know, Putin actually, he made further restrictions along the way. So, and maybe as a last point, I would say it's quite important that somebody owns this responsible leadership and geopolitical agenda in the company, so that it is not something, you know, that just flows on the side, but that you have a dedicated geopolitical functional group, maybe even, you know, with C-level involvement, so that it has some ownership and that there is some accountability.
It has definitely moved up the rows in terms of importance. No doubt about that. And we at CBS Executive Fund, we see that within our board community in particular. So the boards obviously are very, very much more focused on this topic than they used to be. And when the board is, the CEO is as well, right, Britt? So that comes along with the territory. Thank you both for those providing those interesting perspectives. And perhaps, Andreas, I can continue with that with you, because you were mentioning values, and our next question really is, how do you see companies aligning their values with tangible actions to address these challenges? Because you were talking before about risk, and to me, risk is no longer a one-sided coin, right? Because there are monetary risks, but there are certainly also moral risks. And Britt was touching a bit on that with the Russia example, because it's not a one-sided story, the story about whether we stay in Russia or whether we withdraw from Russia. So Andreas, what is your take on this? And maybe you can talk a bit about the tensions and the incentives involved in this.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, if you talk about how to align values with tangible actions, I think we need to talk about tensions, because these are the moments, you know, when values really become alive in corporations. And I tell you a short story out of my research. So I was researching a German retailer, big company, long supply chain, and they were debating whether to pay living wages actually in their supply chain. You know, and living wages and minimum wages, there is a different story around that. And then at some point, it was a family-owned business. The owner and also the manager of the business said, "Look, there is no business case for this. We lose money, but you know, this is my company. These are my values, and I pay it." End of story. So, and I think for me, that was a wonderful example for, of course, you know, this person was in a quite specific situation, not publicly listed company and family-owned business. But it was a situation where attention actually showed the need for reflections on values. And at the end, when we had a chat about it after the meeting, he said, you know, we should not always need a business case to do the right thing. And I think that was a wonderful way to kind of summarize this debate. And as you ask, I mean, how can we align values with tangible actions? I think incentives, you briefly mentioned it, play really a big role, because long-term incentives actually play a significant role. And sometimes I feel that when we try to motivate people and incentivize people for also kind of taking responsible actions, responsible decisions, we don't aim high enough, right? Unfortunately, there was a study by London Business School that the carbon-related targets for executives, so those executives that have carbon-related targets, the payout rate for this was 86%. In other words, if you had a carbon-related target, the money was almost guaranteed. Yeah. And then they looked into why was that actually the case, and they found, well, the targets were not set very high, right? So it was almost kind of
a symbolic.
A symbolic, more like a gift actually to executives, and I'm not saying this in any critical way, but I'm saying this in a way, you know, we need to reflect on how we set really meaningful incentives so that we can live values also in a company. And it's the same. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, because there's the moral compass, and then there is the very concrete compass of incentive schemes, and exactly. Then there is the compass in between. I'm going to address you now, Britt, because then there are the corporate values. And we were curious about, could you maybe to us characterize Ambu's overall guiding business values, and how do you as a leader put action behind those, and maybe provide us with a few examples?
Yeah, because I think for me, I mean, the values of a company, I mean, that's very important. And I mean, I spent many years in my career in Novo Nordisk, where I think the values were really very present in the organization. I mean, across countries, across different cultures. So that inspired me a lot. And I would say when I joined Ambu, I mean, we have our values, and we are also a truly global company with, I mean, we have 5,000 employees, only 10% of those are in Denmark, and we are also very international. So I think that's also why I think that makes it, I mean, even more important to have clear values. So we have actually been working with, I mean, upgrading our values to make them even, I mean, because I think we had some good values, but there were some adjustments in also how we could easier bring them to life.
And
so
maybe they were not so active is also what I hear you say, that it was more like a backdrop paper rather than a steering compass.
Exactly. I don't think they were used. I mean, we didn't do the survey, but had we asked around the company, I don't think people would have.
It would be a low percentage.
Yeah, exactly. And also, and I think even more important, understanding what does this mean. And we had a value that I even think people didn't interpret in the right way. So that was probably the drive. I asked a lot around. So, I mean, to understand what they mean for people before I just went on and changed them. But it became very clear that, I mean, we need something that is a little more actionable and easier to relate to. So, I mean, I think we made it quite simple as well, where we have 3 values in our company, which is take charge, team up, and be true. And what it means is basically, in short, that you need, I mean, that you have ownership and you run with the ball to create results, but that you never forget that you're part of the team and that you must do things properly and in a trust building way. So I think that has really been our global framework. And then in terms of how we operationalize it and make sure that it's not just something that is on the wall or on a mouse pad or whatever companies do. I mean, we have worked with it in a number of ways, in both in and talking about incentives. We are integrating them in our yearly assessment for all employees, and we actually also integrate them in when we hire new people in. So we ask ourselves, I mean, are these people that will fit with our values? We have developed our own leadership compass recently that we are using to focus on leadership development across the company. And the whole leadership compass basically is based on our 3 values, and then we use these to say what are the leadership behaviors that we want to have to show these values. And then I'll also say that I actually talk a lot about our values when I'm in different meetings, both, I mean, when we discuss business topics and exactly when we have some of these difficult discussions. And I think for Ambu, this is very important because of the topic that we talk about here around everything happening around us. So how do we make sure that we all, think about that we do what is right? But actually, the other big challenge we had when I came in was that, as a company, we were in a challenging financial situation. So we have also, had to, do a turnaround of the company at the same time, where I had a lot of focus as well on how we improve our culture. And I think that there's a strong link between culture and values. So that has really been how we have worked with it, and also why it has been so important with our values, because it's really an integrated part of our culture and of what we want to do. So we maybe just, not to go into too many details, but we have a framework that we call One Beat, which I talk about a lot. And I think for everyone in the organization by now, we'll have this picture of an orchestra in the back of their mind where you need to play
your particular instrument.
Exactly. And that you need to have if you're in an orchestra, it also needs to be a harmony, otherwise it doesn't work. And that's really, I think that's our fundament, where we have 3 pillars, where it's both around how we work, and then how we create value, and how we behave, where how we behave is very much around the value. So in that way, it's really super integrated in when we talk about on a daily basis what we do.
So I guess that tells me at least that you as a CEO, of course, but also with your entire management team, you have been working very actively in trying to create meaningful life behind these catchphrases, if you will, right? So, and to me, I think that is the acid test really of making it work, because everyone can formulate nice catchy sentences and beautiful values, but it looks to me like you have actually applied a quite structured way and method to bring them into life among your organization, which was probably important coming from a crisis vantage point, as you described, because I do quite remember the situation of Ambu when you transferred your role from board member to CEO, and there were many tasks ahead of you. And now, fast forwarding to today in January 2025, I think your complexity has grown immensely, right? I mean, with everything happening in the world, with geopolitics, with AI revolution. So what that means to you is you need your people to be able to take decisions quickly, but also take the right decisions. And I guess that's how you try to work really with both the tangible and the intangible leadership requirements and leadership attributes, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it helps a lot, and especially also when you're a global organization with, many different mindsets. You bring people from different functions together. And again, as you are alluding to, speed is quite essential sometimes when things pop up that we need to work with. And I think we needed to also professionalize a bit how we work with internally to also be able to address some of the challenges also coming from the outside. And I think that's really where this has been very helpful in also guiding our cultures and for all our leaders to come together around aligning on how we do.
Yeah, oh, that's a very nice example, and thank you for sharing that with us. And Andreas, how about your academic perspective again and your research in terms of leadership attributes? What do you see coming out of this environment that the business is caught in? What becomes the main attributes?
Yeah, we see a shift also, and I think quite a number of studies also show that if you try to look at attributes that support responsible leadership, we see, for instance, systems thinking being very important, because responsible leadership, also sustainability, it usually crosses different domains. So you need to kind of bring this together, and for that you need to understand how the economic, the social, and also the natural, how these work together. And I think that certainly is an attribute. I would also argue leaders who are kind of long-term thinkers, or at least kind of can bring this into an organization, they are usually well equipped for responsible leadership and kind of pushing values through the organization, because this long-term thinking is at the heart of many of the problems that responsible leadership deals with. Think about climate change, biodiversity, but also think about kind of the more the social agenda, right? These are long-term problems that we need to address, and I think for that you need to have that kind of mindset. So one other kind of attribute that is mentioned in quite a lot of studies, and particularly on the psychological side of studies, is courage, right? Standing up for your values, also defending them in times of crisis, and also making unpopular decisions. I remember there is this wonderful case of Unilever where Paul Polman joins the company and basically quits quarterly guidance for investors because he says, look, I want long-term investors. I don't want short-term investors. So share price goes down 8%, but that's something I think you need to live with. And of course, the share price also recovered afterwards. And I think these kind of courageous moves, they certainly, I would see them also as part of the leadership attributes that we're talking about here.
Thank you so much for elaborating on that, Andreas. And the thing about courage makes me think back to your value number 3, Britt, the value of being true. I guess that has a lot to do with courage as well. And then I would also like to touch upon with you, Britt, because there's a question from the audience that is quite relevant with what we're talking about in case of Unilever, because it's this thing about being a listed company versus a privately owned company. So the question from our audience is, first of all, is it in times of storms that values must stand the stress test? I think that's a very good question. And then there's a byline asking if Ambu is willing to pause or even decline growth to stand up for their values. And if yes, what are the challenges then when you are actually a listed company versus being a privately owned company? So perhaps, Britt, you could bring us in a bit into the decision-making room of this, because the backdrop of being a listed company brings with it some possibilities, but also a lot of constraints. So maybe hear a bit about your thoughts on this.
Yeah, no, I think it's very well said that in times of storm, that, I mean, and that's really also where I think, yeah, the values, but also leadership becomes very, very important, and how you act as leaders, and that you really, back to courage, have the courage to stay firm and make some of these difficult decisions. I mean, I think like the Russia example again.
Yes.
I think, I mean, we were first, I mean, courageous enough to make that decision, which went at the time not against what many other companies did, and I think it was for many companies an even bigger thing than for us, because our business was not as big. But in our industry, I mean, companies didn't really pull back to the same extent. But I think that was also about defending that, and then making sure that you do that while compromising profit. I think this about also being listed. I think there's an element here that I think as a business, if you go back to where we started being a responsible company, I believe that being responsible also means that sometimes you will have to make decisions where it's not always the business case that drives whether you should do it or not. And you should, of course, have a good understanding of the business case, but sometimes you do things for other reasons. And some of the intangible benefits that comes with making decisions that are more responsible actually will, in the longer run, and then that's back to Andreas's point around long-term thinking, in the longer run that will likely pay off. But that's very hard to show in a business case when you sit and have to
exactly.
So that's really also where I think the business case is, in some of these cases, one that, I mean, you need to have to understand, but you also really need to make decisions based on other things than business cases, which goes also a little more against how things were in the past. For me, this about being a listed company, I think you have, and I think when I came in, I mean, our share price was very much down, and we had lost a lot of trust. So yeah, both value and also thereby trust by investors. And I think that was this about building trust, and then at the same time making sure that you have the flexibility. I mean, not to build trust by doing what shareholders want you to do, but you build trust by also doing the right things for the business that are sometimes, again, back to being a little more long-term focused, and then not worrying so much about what is happening in the market tomorrow, because I think that can easily drive the business in the wrong direction.
And it deviates your attention, right?
Exactly. And I think in today's world, this is something, and I'm mentally trying to prepare for this, because this is something also, I mean, with the new Trump regime, I think we have already seen a number of examples of how this affect companies. If we look at the, I mean, energy in the windmill industry, how Vestas went down 7-8% yesterday because Trump had made a comment around windmills. I mean, I think these things, we had an example, I think about a month ago or so, where where, I mean, we have a good global manufacturing footprint where we have manufacturing in Malaysia, China, US, and then Mexico, where we have built our largest plant and opened a couple of years ago. And we are internally doing a lot of scenario planning around, I mean, potential tariff scenarios and what to do. So that's so that we are already doing to be prepared. But then, I mean, with the focus on China, and then one morning waking up here, and then Trump had while we were asleep, suddenly introduced now tariffs in Mexico. And even though this is a comment that is made, and whether, I mean, we don't know, will healthcare,
what are the realities?
Is this going to happen? What about other things? But what with that style from the incoming president in the US, I mean, that affected, I mean, my colleagues in investor relations, I mean, were busy talking to shareholders the whole day. And we also saw some impact in the market. And I think this is really where we have to prepare. That one thing is facts that happens in the world that we need to deal with, which is really where I try to focus. And then another thing is, I mean, things that pops up. I mean, the big theme of this week with Greenland and so on. How we find a good balance of not, I mean, going too much down in these directions, because I think it's very clear that then we cannot do anything else, and we
would need to be reacting all the time to these various inputs. And I so understand your situation. I think right now, before taking over the presidency, he's in the process of sending signals, and he's sending signals left, right, and center. And the stock market is very nervous and reacting by the day. So going back to your point about building trust and really rebuilding trust in the case of Ambu, shows to me, because building trust is a long-term maneuver, right? That doesn't happen overnight. You can lose trust overnight, but you cannot build it overnight. So what you have set forward for Ambu is a long-term engagement of providing value, of doing what you said you would do in the manner that you do it, and thus regaining the confidence from the financial market and the investors. So it's really about having a steady hand on the wheel while the car is being bullied back and forth down the road. So in terms of leadership attributes, I do believe your investment in that particular asset within Ambu will pay off, and is important in terms of responsible business, because it's not going to be an easy drive down the road, obviously. Okay, we have a couple of
earned, and then it's, I mean, now we talked about the shareholders, but it's also very much, I mean, for me coming in here, it was also about
all
being aware that trust is also to be earned among our employees, among our customers, among all other stakeholders.
It's a 360-degree, right? It has to be trust from everyone. Okay. There is a question for you, Britt, from the audience. It says, should business focus only on business, or should business also take part in larger movements in society by having their CEOs use their voice externally on topics like the green transition, women in leadership, etc.? What's your take on this?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think my take is that I do feel also, I mean, responsible and with my voice to, I would say, selectively I mean, engage in what happens in society, because I think no matter how we put it, we as companies, I mean, we are also operating in a society where we are depending on I mean, the society around us, both, I mean, the environment that we are in, as an example, our employees. I mean, I also care about the social well-being of I mean, the people who work at Ambu, as an example, which is broader than Ambu. And that's, of course, a challenge then when you are a global company. But I think, I don't think we as leaders need to have an opinion and engage in every topic. I think it's about having, I mean, there are a few topics where you then, I mean, use your voice. And that's really what I try to do very much. I think for me, it's very much around some of the things that are important on strategically for Ambu as well, and that we really think are important as a responsible company. One being, sustainability and how we are a sustainable company. This is a core part of our strategy. So there, I think also, we can and should engage in discussions. I think for me also, and this is probably more personal thing, given that there are so few female executives. I also dedicate a selected part of my time to promote that agenda, because I think I can play a role in broadening the perspective, so we get more women into not both roles, but into senior executive positions. So I think also, for me, it's, I think a lot about, as the CEO of Ambu, that I also, even I will go out and do something privately, that I always, also represent Ambu, but I think there is also a little bit, and that's my main focus, but there is a bit also of a personal interest. What is it that you really also want to, where is it you want to make a change, and then combining those, and then being selective. I very often would, not give a comment on a topic where it's something that I don't think it's a relevant for Ambu, and thereby
for you, for that matter. Yeah. But I think also that helps you to create real impact, because if you have an opinion about everything, then you really don't have an opinion, right? So I think this way you create true impact when you do take the word, when you do state your opinion.
Yeah, and there's a lot of complex, back to what we are talking about, there's so, much complexity in the world, and so many nuances in some of the challenges that we have, and that's where I think you have to be very careful what you go out and talk about, because if you, don't have a clear view or a clear perspective, then it's better not to talk.
Not to talk. The last question that I will pose to both of you, really, from the audience, because we also need to wrap up soon, is I think it's an interesting one, because it twists around and says, how do you see business opportunities in acting more responsibly? So most of us will per automatic think that, being responsible probably is not good for business. And fortunately, research greatly demonstrate that the opposite is actually true, and that in many ways there are no conflicts really between purpose and profit. But business opportunities, Andreas, I will start with you, and then maybe Britt, you can throw us a one-liner to finish up. How do you see it? Because you've done a lot of research on this, I know.
Yeah, of course, there are very often, when we talk about this kind of alignment of purpose and profit, we look at the risk side, right? We kind of say it's reduced risk, so hence it's good. But actually, research also shows there are lots of arguments for growth, new markets, new products. So this is where responsibility, I think, plays a role. But I think it also has a lot to do with kind of these intangible things, kind of maybe the word human capital management would be a good word here, where you motivate employees, where you retain, where you attract employees because they perceive you in terms of responsible leadership as authentic. So I think for me that actually is one of the biggest opportunity, particularly with the new generation. I see it at CBS here every day. Gen Z is different. They think differently. So for them, responsible leadership matters.
Thank you, Andreas. And how would you respond to that, Britt? And do you agree?
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it's back to what we talked about here. I think making a positive change, I think there's a lot of opportunities for us as companies. I think at Ambu, the whole sustainability environment agenda, we have taken a position that few companies have done, where we focus a lot also on how we help our customers being more responsible, because they actually struggle with this as well. And I think we see now we get more and more attention based on this. And then there's just the whole technology agenda, where there are major opportunities, and that change, if we tap into that, which we are doing, we can do. And then again, I think when attracting the best talent, and that's, our business is only successful if we have the best talent. And I think Andreas's comment on that, if you are responsible as a company and you do things for the greater good, you attract the best people, and thereby you create better business results.
And end up becoming net positive in terms of your people, in terms of your organization and company, and in terms of society as a whole. Beautiful roundup. Thank you so much. And thank you warmly to both of you, Britt and Andreas, for sharing with us today your very interesting views. Unfortunately, time is up. It always is when you're doing something interesting like this. I have to just really quickly mention that we will continue on with this topic, and our next responsible business brief will be on March 11 in the morning, where we will be visited by Vestas, actually, as you mentioned, Britt. So that's going to be interesting to hear Henrik Andersen's take on the turmoil that he and his troops have also been going through. And then also, it is our great pleasure to welcome Peter Mølgaard, who is the president of CBS, but who is also the chair of the Danish Council of Climate Change, Klimarådet. So needless to say, Peter is very passionate about this agenda as well. I hope you will all join us. Links and further information will be emailed to you. So thank you all for listening in this morning, and I hope the session has been inspiration and food for thoughts. And once again, Britt and Andreas, thank you so much for being with us this morning. And everyone, have a great day out there.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much as well.